am Professor Sheila, and today I will host the lecture of Professor Dr. Guillermo Rodríguez-Abitia. So in a brief career resume, if that even is possible, Guillermo Rodríguez-Abitia holds a PhD in Information Systems by the University of Texas at Arlington. He has more than 35 years of academic experience in across multiple institutions. He is the former president and founder of the Latin American and Caribbean chapter of the Association for Information Systems, co-founder of the Latin American and Caribbean Journal of the AIS, twice co-chair of the Americas Conference on Information Systems, former member of the IS Council, and active member of many associations with extensive journal editorial work. He is currently the Director for Innovation and Technology Development at the General Direction of Information and Communications Technologies at Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. The lecture today is about a brief history of the evolution of the IS discipline in the region in order to gain insights on its current status, followed by a proposal of a research agenda based on a digital transformation model, along with the description of an ongoing research project on the subject. In advance, thank you a lot for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you, Professor Guillermo.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm very honored for the invitation. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay. When talking to Flavio about the possibility of being with you today, well, he basically asked me to go over a very well-known presentation that I've done a few times that talks about the history of the IS discipline in Latin America and how it's evolving. But then we decided that I was going to be complementing it with some other issues of a current research project that is, I think, very pertinent to mention as a consequence of what we're going to be talking of this current status of the discipline. So in the agenda today, we have first the evolution of IT programs, then talk about the IS programs and the IS community, in particular in the region, in the Latin American region, then some relevant actions that are being undertaken to develop the field in the region, and then describe a project that I'm personally overseeing right now on assessing digital transformation in Latin American organizations. So then we can conclude all together. First of all, let me talk about the evolution. For many of you, this is going to be a common knowledge. For many of you, probably never stopped to think about it, on how the IT careers, how the IT majors came to be as they are today, and what is it that is happening for the near future. So if we go back in time, the first inclusions of computing in the curriculum was in the majors of mathematics and mechanical engineering. So there was not, back in the 50s and early 60s, any particular dedicated major for computing. Then computer science arrives, probably at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, probably mid-60s is when we have the first formal programs on it. And then this evolves to computer engineering. And then we have the information systems discipline in the early 70s, perhaps being growing very fast with two different approaches. One that is more related to the technical issues of information systems development, which we know normally as CIS, or computer information systems. And another one that is more oriented towards the administrative parts of it, the strategic, the managerial aspects of information technology that is currently known as MIS. Then we also have some evolution on talking about software engineering. And then we have the newcomers, now that we talk about the Industry 4.0, that we reach a point in which the use of technology becomes so appropriated and so common and so easy for many other majors that at a certain point in time, there was a question whether an IT profession was still needed, or whether the IT skills should be distributed along the different disciplines as they could do their own computing. Of course, it all just comes to a particular evolution of the field. And we have new trends in new majors based on what's happening in Industry 4.0 that are very important, like data science, data engineering, cybersecurity, and in some cases, Internet of Things. So if we think about how, I know if you guys are familiar with the fact that ACM, the Association for Computer Machinery, and the IEEE normally publish reference models for curriculum of the different IT-related disciplines. And they came to a point in 2005 of deciding that they were going to be using 5 referential models, which were computer engineering, computer science, information systems, information technology, and software engineering. All of them basically approach the same areas, but in different amounts. And the level of concentration in particular areas is what made a difference. So if we think about computer science, for example, computer science is the most mathematical of all. It's the more scientifically based. In computer science, we have a tendency to look into operating systems and machine level programming, right? Whereas in computer engineering, we focus on the gadgets. And it's more like, how do you develop artifacts? How do you develop electronics? It's related to electronics and build computers, right? Which in turn use the operating systems that the computer scientists do. Then we have information systems, which, as you notice, we go a lot more onto the top, which is a lot more in the applied area, but also in the business area, which is opposed completely to computer engineering, which is a lot more. It is applied. It's also on the right, but it's also in the bottom because it's more in the basic sciences. And in information systems, obviously, the focus is on the application of information technology for organizations. Whereas in information technology, that's another profile that relates to the role of an integrator, right? So it's more of a professional that is capable of not of developing technology, but integrating technology. It's a lot more in the applied side, so it's all to the right. And then we have the software engineer, which has to be somewhere in the middle, right? A very strong software formation, but also some skills about understanding the business. All in all the profiles should completely fill, as we can see in the bottom right, all the areas that are competent to the information technology profession. But this was the 2005 view. Okay, so what happens now that they are reviewing, and I think it is just been recently published, the new profiles and the new reference models. What is the view of computing according to the curriculum 2020? Okay, so now we see computer foundation on the bottom, domain activity on the top, computing technology in the middle, and then also have hardware, software, and organizational needs on the right. And we have the big one, the big circle that is computing, and then we have all the computing things, right? Like security, these are dimensions, right? Hardware, software, security, IT platforms and structures, digital transformation and intelligence on the right. And then we have the different profiles of the different reference models that they are being developed. So do we have an identity crisis? I mean, do we need really to be an IT professional to perform graphics? Or would I rather be a communication specialist, right? A multimedia specialist rather than that. So where are we now? Where do we stand? I think a lot of those things are being solved now, but also in Latin America, we have a double identity crisis because we tend to have some differences in the way we apply these curricular models to our own reality. So there are many programs in Latin America that tend to be fully computer information systems rather than management information systems. In a way, they see themselves as a light version of a computer engineer. And that should not be farther from the truth because it is not the same profile. It is not the same objective, right? Also, there is a problem with the programs, how they are named. In many of our countries, if the word says engineer, then it automatically it has a better status, right? Than if you don't say engineer and you just say a business professional. So they tend to change names in such ways, interchange names in different programs that are completely different or have very different names in very similar programs. So that makes a problem also with the identity crisis. Another problem is that and this is becoming less lately in certain countries, but it's still very, very common in many, that professors normally don't have a PhD, and certainly not in MIS, because that discipline is really very little developed in our region, with a few exceptions, right? So there are very few programs, PhD programs that are truly MIS, and basically the only two countries that, in my opinion, are definitely growing in that regard are Brazil and Chile. The rest of the continent is still a lot, I mean, in the Latin American region, south of the Bravo River, that are very much behind in this sense. And the MIS programs tend to disappear in private universities due to the lack of enrollment. This is as a result of a general tendency of students not enrolling in IT programs, maybe because they don't find them sexy anymore. So they have all these other programs that have very strange names like robotics, mechatronics, whatever, and they go to those ones rather than going into MIS programs. Contrary to the demand, because demand is really requiring a lot of MIS graduates, but it's not happening. Now, what has been done in terms of the building an IS community in Latin America? So if we think about, of course, this does not include a lot of local efforts in each one of the countries, right? But thinking about globally, and we know that in the Americas, the main conference is AMSIS, right? The Americas Conference on Information Systems is probably the largest and most international conference that is for this region, for this continent. So AMSIS, back in 2000, when it happened in Long Beach, there was an inauguration of a Latin American track. Okay, so there was some interest now in talking about Latin America back in 2000. Then in about that year in 2002, a little later, there was a visit of AIS, the Association for Information System, made a particular task group that looked to reach out to the South, right? And bring all those tons of scholars that were not in the association that should be included, right? To make it truly international. The problem is really there weren't a ton of scholars and they didn't know who to call, and I was the only one, so they did. They called me and I was lucky enough to be there. So as a result of that, with the very few who were there, we created the Latin American chapter, and we made a bid for organizing AMSIS for the first time outside of the US in Acapulco in 2006, which we won. 1 year before that event in Nebraska, in Omaha in 2005, the Latin American track evolved to be a Spanish-speaking track. So for the first time, we also had papers presented in another language different to English. In 2006, we had the first time AMSIS outside of the US. It was in Acapulco. We proved that we could organize good events, and we also proved that we could organize very good parties. And that is a key element for making a very good conference. And then we also created back in between 2006 and 2010, there were many events happening. So for once, we finally had Latin American representatives in council. And also we created the journal, the Latin American Journal of the AIS, which later evolved to, as well as the track in AMSIS, to accept papers in Portuguese. Because at the very beginning, the presence of Portuguese speaking people was very, very low. And fortunately, that has completely switched around. In 2010, we repeated the organization of AMSIS in Lima, in Peru. And from then on, it was declared that every 4 years it would be done in Latin America, which is also a very good thing. Then in 2014, ISLA is born as an initiative, a Brazilian initiative of invited talks in graduate programs in Brazil. And it went on for a few years, and then it got a very good, breaking ground last year. No, this year, actually. And before I get to that, in 2015, AMSIS is organized in Puerto Rico. Honestly, we did not have anything to do with that. For some reason, the AIS Council decided to go to Puerto Rico, which, by the way, is an associate state of the US. So it's half Latin America, half not. And then we repeated the task of doing AMSIS in 2019 in Cancun last year. And again, it was a very good event, and it was a very good party. And it's the last time I do it, I promise. And then we had ISLA this year, taking advantage of the fact that AMSIS was going to be completely virtual. We decided to make ISLA an ancillary event of AMSIS, and for the first time having a series of innovations like a scientific program and keynotes and video competitions and so on. And it was a very successful program that we put together in a very short time. And then in 2023, we're going back to Latin America, to Panama City. We did not have much to do in that scene either, but we're going to be helping, that's for sure. So that pretty much sums it up. So what's still left to do? We have a strong need for a quality outlet that is truly IS in our region. So we have certain very nice attempts of doing so, like RELCASI, which is the Latin American Journal of the IS, and RECI, which is Brazilian, specifically for information systems. And then we have another one like Enlace, which is Venezuelan, not specifically only for IS, but also for IT, and so on. But none of them is really, groundbreaking, and it's not really high impact. Right now, we're working very hard on giving RELCASI a comeback. And we're getting all the past issues that were pending to be published. And with some luck, in a few years, it's going to be a lot more well-regarded and indexed rather than it is today. So what is our aim? As we say, revitalize RELCASI and make it a premium outlet for the IS discipline in Latin America. Also consolidate ISLA as the official conference of LACAIS. No longer a regional Brazilian conference, but actually a Latin American conference that is under the umbrella of the Latin American chapter of the IS, to continue and grow the good work of the Latin American track in AMSIS, share resources to for faculty and student development, the two is a mistake, either by a virtually integrated PhD program that could be multinational. This was a project that was introduced before its time, like 10 years ago, to the AIS, and it was too early to propose something like that. At this point, especially after the pandemic, we have very much proof that it can be done virtually with physically distributed, geographically distributed faculty, and it could be a very, very interesting project to do, so that we can sum up forces, right? And not having to have all the faculty concentrated physically in one place, but actually trying to do some collective intelligence with that. And doing research seminars, we already started, thanks to Flavio Rita for having that initiative, global talks and a common repository, many other different initiatives that can be done. Also, to look for joint proposals for research grants. This is something that still needs to be developed one step at a time. And projects, very, very important, that can impact our region positively. Okay, it's not just a matter of doing research, but doing research that actually matters in our region, right? And then try to position LACAIS in worldwide. So, as I say, the most important thing is we need to promote relevant research in IS for the region. I have this autocorrector that keeps giving the accent to region. I'm sorry about that, because it doesn't recognize that it's in English. So for the región. And in other words, it's not a matter of doing just whatever. Let's do something that actually can make a difference. And I think that could be a really, really impacting way of making our chapter grow. As an example, I want to talk to you about a little project, not so little project, that I am overseeing along with my colleague, Graciela Briviesca, from the Faculty of Accounting and Business Administration in UNAM. That is sponsored, so to speak, not sponsored with money, but sponsored in name by the ALAFEC, which is the Association for Faculties and Schools of Accounting and Administration, the Latin American Association. Which looks to, the project is bigger. It has 3 phases. The project talks about the application of information technologies as a factor for fostering development in the region, right? And in the first phase of the project, we set out to make a diagnostic study of how well Latin American organizations are profiting or are leveraging, right, information technology to promote competitiveness, and as a consequence of competitiveness, promote development. So the first thing was to make a diagnostic of how well we're doing in terms of you call it readiness, maturity, leverage, or digital transformation, I think all the concepts tend to merge. So we're attempting to do some relevant research. So what is all this about? We understand, and we should set out a research agenda based on how the technology trends are transforming the rules of the market and are transforming the way organizations do business. So there are so many concepts happening as a consequence of the huge hyperconnectivity that defines the Industry 4.0 issue. We have things like an Internet of Things coming into action, trying to provide services and products that can be added value through remote control through the IoT, which in turn makes it more vulnerable, hence emphasizing the importance of cybersecurity. And then also the fact that we are receiving some ridiculous amount of data from every channel in every way at all time that we need to make sense of. And so the big data, data science, analytics trends are very important also for companies today. Alternative security transactions with blockchain, also cloud computing, more important than ever. Artificial intelligence that finally is reaching to a point in which it has some relevant business application. I'm saying finally because we talk about artificial intelligence for a long time. And probably back in the 90s, you would always question, okay, all this, what application does it have, right? You would have all these scientists working on algorithms and neural networks and doing multi-agent systems and then what, right? I mean, what do I get out of it? Now we're seeing results because actually artificial intelligence is being applied to business. Way. And we also have open innovation, that collaboration is important, and then therefore the concept of collective intelligence gains also a lot of relevance. And open innovation in the sense that we need to collaborate to make a lot more people integrated into one innovation project that is going to give me a lot more products than the one that was originally intended. We're talking about sharing economy where consumers become producers and producers become consumers. And we also have all these things put together trying to have the citizen as the center of the improvement of quality of life based on technology in the concept of smart cities. So what we're trying to do is figure out how these emerging technologies or traditional technologies are being used in Latin America. And for that, we have some premises that are important to consider. First of all, when we see a large portion of ICT being applied, we also have a large level of competitiveness and a large level of development, okay? And this is shown not by us, but this is shown by the World Economic Forum in the competitive index, in the network readiness index. Everything else is very, very well correlated. You have countries that have applied huge amounts of information technology into their function, and then you have, these are also the most developed ones. And the opposite also happens. So there's a correlation between ICT application and development. Also, the key is to profit from the use of information and communication technologies, but not just to implement them, to profit from them, because that's what I call an intelligent use of ICTs rather than just a use of ICTs. And then we have to understand also that competitiveness at the organizational level leads to development at the national level or regional level. And local conditions for ICT implementation and display must be taken into account, because regardless of the fact that technology probably doesn't change, there are certain things that do need to be considered depending on the context. And the Latin American context has certain nuances that are specific of the region. So if we go back to the literature and revise what this concept of profiting from IT has been in the past, we can go back to the famous productivity paradox by Brynjolfsson that said that it was funny enough to find out that those industries that were doing intensive investment in IT were not having a great increase in productivity. There was no correlation. And obviously the conclusion was that there can be two things. The effects of investing in IT is delayed, so you will not see immediate returns. And second, there are many other factors that are affecting, right? So you have to take into consideration how you are implementing the technology, whether it's aligned with the IT strategy or not. Does it have any sense to do it? Or just investing by technology, investing is not the solution. Then we move on, and there were many authors that try to make this merge between IT strategy and managerial strategy. So for that, we have first the classic work of Zachman about the information systems architecture and the information technology infrastructure, which he tries to make sense on a matrix type model of different levels of participation in the organization and different questions that need to be answered. And then he integrates many existing tools into that particular framework. So the main advantage that it has is it's very integrated, but also it's very complex. On the other hand, we have the balanced scorecard by Kaplan and Orton. And in the balanced scorecard, I have to make a disclaimer that this is not an IT model, right? This is a business model. However, it's very good at fixing metrics to every action that you do. So if you talk about the information technology that you will require to fulfill the objectives and the 4 levels of detail that the balance score has, then you have metrics also for information technology, and you're guaranteeing certain level of alignment. Then we move on to models that are particularly to align business and IT strategy. For those, the typical are Henderson and Venkatraman and the Luhmann model. The difference, the Luhmann model is a maturity model, whereas the Henderson and Venkatraman model is more the static kind of way. Then we also have a digital maturity model by Venkatraman, and the concept of e-readiness that was introduced first as a national model at the national level, expressing that was the capability of a country to take advantage of information technology for its development. How ready they are to take advantage of information technology. But this concept was later moved to down to an organizational level as well. And it was more referred to the ability of an organization to engage in e-commerce, but also had to do a lot with the integration of processes through information technology, integration between the organization and the strategic partners, etc. And then we have all these concepts that have been very much a buzzword in the last years about digital transformation and innovation strategies. So I'm not going to talk about each one of these. These are more modern that try to integrate certain levels of the old models. But if you think about it, all these concepts lead to the same point, right? Is how well an organization is able to transform itself, to digitize and also digitalize and make advantage of information technologies for strategic purposes. So with that in mind, my colleague Garciela and I set to the task of creating an integrated model based on elements that came from all these previous models. And we decided to create a model that was a matrix-like model that relates organizational dimensions that come from these authors, basically, talking about digital strategy, leadership and culture, market digitization, strengthened logistics, and dynamic and digital capabilities with certain transformational objectives, which are represented by the columns. Those are value creation, technological benefit, and structural agility. And overall cross-sectional concepts that also relate to all this are the financial viability and the innovation as the understanding that digital transformation is the result of a continuous innovation strategy. We're not going to get into the details of each one of these, but from this model, we decided to create a certain way of measuring it and use it as our diagnostics tool to analyze the companies in the countries that were participating. So a call was made in Alafec to participate in what they call the macro project. And right now we count on the participation of 39 researchers from several countries: Mexico, Honduras, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. And it's a pity we don't have more, but also it's a lot of work and it can always be extended. So just what we have is we develop an instrument based on Likert scales with 5 points, at least 3 items per construct in each one of the little squares in the model, as well as the intersection with the cross-sectional constructs. That led us to 74 model questions and 6 demographics to control for the size of the company, the activity of the company, the country, etc. And we've performed some face and content validity by expert panel from the 6 countries that we are participating. And we try to always do the survey in neutral Spanish, given that it was only Spanish-speaking people that were participating. But you know, Spanish can vary a lot. So we decided to make it as neutral as possible. And then we went on to do some pilot tests. The first pilot test was a pilot test with a sample of 30 organizations that had some problems with 2 constructs that had us do a second pilot. After we did the adjustment, the second pilot pretty much had some adjustments to do, but left us with coefficients with very satisfactory reliability alpha, Cronbach alpha coefficients, greater than 0.7 is the smallest, and then we have 0.8 and 0.9 for all the rest of them. The final instrument actually grew. It was an 85 question instrument. And what's next? What are we doing now? Right now, we're collecting data from the main sample. And our target is to have 200 respondents per country. As of today, this morning, we had 125. I looked a little while ago, it was 127, so we're doing well. After we gather all the information, what we plan to do is 2 main analyses. One is the development of a composite index that can help us measure digital transformation in the organizations of a particular country, and also validation of cultural relationships in the model. Probably through structural equation modeling. We don't know yet because it depends on the nature of the sample. And then we will move on to a qualitative validation. Once we have the findings, then we will conduct in-depth interviews with key actors from academia, government, and industry in each one of the participating countries, so that we can compare and further understand what we're seeing as a result of the survey. And we plan to perform some content analysis on those. Once with that in mind, we can build reports by country with specific recommendations per country, probably on public policy, probably on actions that can be done from chambers of commerce and so on and so forth to foster the intelligent use of ICT in each one of the countries. And of course, we plan to do an international regional report. I'm not going to go into more details than that. What do we expect to find? Obviously, some information on key enablers or deterrents for ICT implementation in Latin America. Should there be different from those overseas? The current state of the digital capacities by organizations and to elaborate functional recommendations. But further than just than that, I think the largest achievement that we can have is consolidating a network of collaboration, right, that is international, to study disruptive technologies and their impact in our particular region, and to create all this series of possibilities. Talking to each other is a very important first step. And also important to know that from this, we can derive an evaluation and consulting methodology that is available for each one of the participants in each one of the country groups. Are you interested in forming a Brazilian group? Let me know. Okay, we would be happy to have this translated to Portuguese and then extending it to other countries in Latin America, because the more the merrier. This is like a party, and I think the results can be really, really exciting, and the achievements can be really, really incredible. So without further ado, I thank you so much for your time, and I open to any questions that you might have. I will be happy to increase the level of doubt that you might have in each one of the things that I just presented. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you a lot, Professor Guillermo. It was brilliant, your presentation. I
hope I wasn't too fast. I tend to do that.
No, it was very good. I knew that the audience enjoy a lot, and I'm sure that we have some questions for the people. So please, if anyone have your question, you can do it.
Ask in Portuguese. I understand some, but I know I have Flavio to translate.
Yeah, okay. I will say that. Yeah, I will say that. Então, pessoal, por favor, fiquem à vontade para fazer as perguntas. Pode ser em português, nós fizemos a tradução, bem tranquilo. Foi excelente mesmo a palestra. Alguém gostaria de fazer alguma pergunta? Iniciar aqui pelo Zoom?
One at a time.
Can I do it?
Of course, that. Please, Fábio.
Okay, so Guillermo, thank you very much for your talk. It's always good to see you speaking and explaining this history of IS, and now bringing this new idea or this new discussion about digital transformation is really nice. I think that we still have a lot to do, and I'm really happy that you open the invitation to the Brazilian people, because we kind of have now a very good community here, and this might be also an opportunity for people from this talk or this meeting or this, this group of people can join and maybe create some Brazilian chapter and then contribute with your program. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, my question is about the you mentioned the digital maturity, right? It's a topic that I'm quite interested on it, because we are talking about these different levels of transformation, right? Because you cannot go from one stage to the other straight away, because you have to have like several steps before reaching a proper transformation itself. And one of the things that I read is that this digital maturity might be one method or one approach to increase the, let's say, the success of doing a proper transformation. But how difficult is that? That's the key point, because if you're starting to implement this digital maturity, and then in the middle of the way you realize it might be a very tough task, how this comes for the whole organization that's implementing it?
We have been working, thank you for that. I mean, it's a very good question. Yes, we actually are trying to make this a maturity model, right? Not just once in a time measure. So what I have been working lately also is in building a rubric. So with all those elements that you saw in the model, basically, if I go to the first one and I say, okay, this is the intersection between digital strategy and value creation. So in other words, I want to see what are the things that you're doing in the use of information technology as part of your strategy to create value with your products and services, right? And or how do you use information technology to define your strategy and your value? And what we have been doing is define 5 levels, right, of maturity, from saying incipient to initiated, medium, the typical, right, to advanced and consolidated. Call it whatever you want to call them, 5 levels of maturity. And in each one of them, based on the items that compose each one of those elements, saying, okay, this is where you stand if you are in an incipient level. And this is what I expect to find if you are already initiated, but you're not quite there yet. And then in the middle, and then the advanced, and then the consolidated level. So it's describing in words, in so many words, all the different elements that will compose. Now, what happens if I find that certain elements are in level 4, but the other ones are in level 2? Then as customary in this cases, in this kind of types of model, I declare that you're in level 2, right? And then, but my recommendation for you is very obvious, right? I look at the elements in which you're behind, and that's what you need to work, right? And this is how you can do it. And if you change this, then you might change very quickly from a level 2 to a level 4, depending obviously on each one of the realities, right? The difficult thing is really to build a rubric. And I have been working with that with some students that I had from Peru, and that I'm trying to sum it all up and do a rubric that we can actually try in particular, in a second phase, in particular organizations. At this point, what we're doing is just measuring with a Likert scale, right? So from nothing to a lot. And in a way, you're going to give me a sense of your level of maturity, but it's based on perception, right? And on the perception of the respondent. So I cannot trust it completely, but yeah, it will give me a good feel, at least of how you feel about your organization. And then if you tell me that you're a 3, then I can compare that 3 to what I have in my rubric, item by item, right, on what a level 3 would be. So basically that's what we're working on. And I think it is going to be very, very encouraging. And that gives you also a very clear methodology for a consulting tool, right? That you can apply in an innovation setting, in a park or in a cluster or in any industry that you wish to develop. Then you can do that diagnostic at a very deep level for each one of the organizations. That's the idea. I don't know if I answered your question or I.
It was very good. It was a very good rapidly because
I'm really excited about this. I'm happy to share all this with you guys. Because I think it's a common knowledge creation, and that's what we need to do as a region.
We should keep in touch and then we discuss this afterwards because
absolutely.
I have some stuff for you as well.
Good, because I came here recruiting.
So, Professor, we have 2 questions in the YouTube channel about the model. So, Luis Claudio Diogo Reis asked for you, talking about the model, have you developed indicators for each dimension?
Yes, we have. That's what I was talking about when we were talking about the construction of the rubric, right? So each one of these elements has particular indicators, and those indicators are also reflected in the items of the questionnaire.
Okay, and Monica Ferreira da Silva asked for you. Congratulations for your work. How many constructors are there in the instrument that you developed? Can you show us the theoretical model? Is it published yet?
We did a small publication in Spanish in a conference, but I'm working right now on a paper that is going to be hopefully sent to a journal. But I'll be happy to share that first draft, of course. And we have 5 by 3. That's 15 constructs plus 3 times 2, which is 6 more. It's 21 constructs in total, right? Plus the dependent variable, which we would consider the perceived digital transformation by the organizational manager.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question also, really, and actually I have a lot, but I will choose the first one. It's kind of not really about the model or the work, but something as society and as people reflecting the time that we are living. So we currently live in an information era. But at the same time, we also experience some digital exclusion. So how we can deal with this paradox?
I know, it is horrible. It's a big problem. And this problem actually has become a lot more sensitive in the last months, right? I mean, when we face this problem of the pandemics in which we have to be in a lockdown and you have to be teleworking, but probably you don't have access to technology. And those who have access to technology, well, they're doing okay. But those that don't have it, they get a lot more excluded than they used to be. It's a huge problem. It has to be solved. One of the things that I recently wrote a paper on this special section for the communications of the AIS that fortunately was accepted, should be published soon, about dealing with the COVID pandemic in Mexico, in particular the case of the National Autonomous University of Mexico. We live it every day because we have 360,000 students in our university. But from those, probably 20% don't have internet access or a computer at home. Okay, so how do you plan to deliver distance learning when they don't have the basic infrastructure for it? And if you think about 20% of a 360,000 student university, 70,000 people at least, right? It's not a small problem that as a university suddenly you have to solve. So what do you do? And that's where we started talking about how to, the first thing is like in the Maslow category, right? You cannot be self-realized unless you eat and you have a shelter and you have a roof. First is first. You have to have infrastructure. First, you have to have access to technology. What we did is, as few examples, right? We decided to do 2 strategies for this. One was to open access centers close to the students' homes, distributed around the city, that had all the distance, social distancing and safety requirements, so that students that do not have access to anything can go there and work there. And we also made huge arrangements with suppliers, right? And you should not underestimate the willingness of vendors and other organizations to help, to provide them, our students, certain students that were identified as such, with tablets with 4G, right? And with the communications plan included, so that they could go home with those tablets and at least perform the basic connection to their courses and Informatics, right? At home, without having to spend a single peso, right? Basically. And even though this does not solve everything, because we also have to do so many other things like a lot of training, a lot of psychological, how do you call it, assessment and help, and so many other things that were, when it appears, please read my article. I would be happy to hear your comments about it. But that's only one little example, right? If you think about the workforce and the work environment, how do you do that? Now, you have to understand that there are certain jobs that are not lent themselves for teleworking, because they're manual, because they're manufacturing, and they're simply locked down, they're closed, the period. I mean, there's no way you can do anything about it. But in other works that could be done from home, then our aim should be, how do we establish the proper infrastructure or infrastructure sharing, or the appropriate collaboration amongst vendors, government, and enterprises to do some platforms that help for that, right? Otherwise, it's true. I mean, the digital exclusion is going to get bigger, and it's going to be a big problem. I couldn't agree more.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have another question? So taking your answer as a start point, I also think about this pandemic time that we're living now, and what does the tale of the pandemic tell us about the current state of digital transformation, and how do we walk forward for this subject?
Do you think that pandemic is bad or good for digital transformation?
I think that is both. For one side, it's very good, because cut off some previous or pre, I don't know how to say in English, the word escaped me, but some preconceived concept that we have. It's not possible to do this in a online way, as this conference. I'm very sad because this conference is not presential and is online, but the knowledge is here. It's not right. Our living, our join. So I cannot join the Flavio's company and the other professors here that I care a lot. But at the same time it's good, but at the same time it's bad, because it's possible to do, but we feel I miss the people.
Right, so, of course we miss the people. I agree with you, but I think actually the pandemic is doing a positive effect, in the sense that it's pushing us to places that we were refusing to go. So companies did not want to move online. They were completely against home office, because if I cannot have you here, that means I cannot control you, right? And now they have to. At the university, it's the same thing. We were saying, be careful what you wish for, because we're getting it. I mean, finally, we made professors move online, and finally, we made professors have to learn about digital technologies and options to do other things that normally they don't want to do. So we are breaking paradigms forcefully, okay? And so in that sense, it is giving us a little bit of an edge. Now everybody's interested in preparing for the next pandemic or the next crisis or the next whatever, so that they don't have to suffer as much as they did this time. So in a way, it's giving us an opportunity. And I think this goes back to the inclusion question, that those two things are really good topics for research that are relevant research for our region, right? And I was talking about doing relevant research that is relevant for our region. And I think it is very publishable, it's very interesting, and it could make a difference. So trying to make a difference, I think, should be the main aim here. And let's take the advantage of the wave that is already here. I mean, it's either you swim or you drown. So you better learn to swim. And everybody's learning to swim. And so that's a good thing that we need to take advantage of.
Just to mention about this resilience about the technology, through the technology, because I think that we are learning from this event, and then try to be a little bit more reliable when a new pandemic strike. And there's a call, I don't know if you saw it, on MISQ. I think it's led by Panos Konstantinos from Manchester. And it's exactly about digital resilience. How can we use technology for improving the resilience of people against a crisis or critical events? That's a very nice one as well.
And I haven't, when you think about why should I do this if they're not going to believe in the US when I do research on resilience in Brazil, right? And they're going to question that it's not important because it's in Brazil. Fred Niederman just contacted me, and he's contacting Alexandre Gremel so that we can start a special section on CIS about how global is IS research, right? And how important it is to consider all the different. Is it really different if we talk about Brazil than if we talk about New Zealand or we talk about Russia? Should we make a difference, right? And I think it's going to be a very good opportunity to put yourselves also in the map and say, okay, you have to take me seriously when I do some work in Mexico, that the fact that it's done in Mexico doesn't mean that it's not external, right? Externalizable. And talking about resilience, I mean, it's fantastic because that you can give it a global approach, right? Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I talked with Alexandre a few weeks ago about this kind of stuff we can do. Maybe we should have like not only a special issue, but like try to publish a little bit more, or try to engage a little bit more on the collaborations between our countries. And yeah, let's see. I think that this meeting, one of the ideas that I have when I invited you for this as well, it was to prove that I know that you like.
In reality, it was oh my God, there's nobody else available, but that's okay.
Ah, no, come on. That's not true. That's not true. And
I don't feel offended. Don't worry about it.
So, Guillermo, in behalf of all the coordinators of the symposium, I would like to thank you a lot for your great presentation, great lecture. It was very exciting and very provocative. So also I'd like to say that I love Mexico, and I fall in love for the Mexico City. And in this year, my plan was blocked by I think that I will speak in Spanish because I am so excited that the English words are disappearing in my mind. So,
right.
Profesor, pues en este año yo iba a pero la UNA de Mérida, a hacer mi postdoctoral estudio con el profesor Ernesto Pérez Rueda. Pues yo hago muchos trabajos aplicados en la biotecnología, en la biología y todo eso, cómo emplear los sistemas de informaciones en las áreas de las ciencias de la vida. Entonces, pero la pandemia me quitó
el gusto y la ilusión.
Sí, mis estudios postdoctorales, pero ojalá cuando la pandemia se termina, yo pueda ir a Mérida a hacer, pero me encanta la Ciudad de México, el pueblo, la comida,
Bienvenida cuando quieras,
Pues,
Juan. Bienvenida, bienvenidos todos.
Yo no viviera en sí, seguro que si yo no viviera en Brasil, yo viviría tranquilamente en la Ciudad de México, pues todo me encantó, el Zócalo, la Plaza Garibaldi.
Bueno, tranquilamente.
Todo.
No, yeah. We'll go back to English. You're right. We miss the people. We need to have the people. So, but in the meantime, I think that one of the good things is that we have seen a lot more of each other than we would have otherwise. So there's always a good positive side. Thank you so much for having me. Muito obrigado pelo convite.
Ai, que lindo! Obrigada a todos, então, pela presença, pelas perguntas, foi realmente excelente. Obrigada pela oportunidade de ser a host dessa excelente palestra. E amanhã temos mais um dia de evento, nosso último dia, com mais palestras e eventos de excelente qualidade, sessões técnicas. Vejam a programação, o Flávio vai mandar um e-mail para todos também, com o resumo do dia, e a programação de amanhã, gente. Um abração.
Até mais, muito obrigado.
Thank you, Guillermo. See you.
Thank you, Flavio. Misbehave. Don't get caught.
You too. Be safe.